let's dive right into this explainer, because today we are unpacking a historical mystery that honestly just blows my mind. We are talking about Al-Ghazālī. Think of him as an 11th century intellectual superstar. This is a guy who seemingly had it all. He had immense wealth, unmatched fame, absolute political influence, and then, out of nowhere, he just walks away from every single bit of it. It's easily one of the most intriguing vanishing acts in intellectual history, and today we're going to break down exactly what happened, and more importantly, why. So picture this. Imagine a man at the absolute peak of his career in 1095 Baghdad. He is the most celebrated professor in the entire empire. But suddenly, he develops this mysterious affliction. He totally loses his ability to speak. He can't even eat. The best doctors examine him, and they determine there's zero physical cause for this. It's entirely psychological. And shortly after that diagnosis, he just disappears without a trace. The huge question we have to answer here is why on earth did the medieval world's greatest scholar abandon his wealth, his fame, and his students literally overnight? Look at how fast this all happened. His ascent was meteoric. He was born in 1058 to a pretty modest background, but he rapidly climbs the academic ranks. By 1091, boom, he arrives in Baghdad, which is the absolute beating heart of the Islamic Empire. But then, hit pause at 1095. In July, he gets hit with this severe physical and psychological impediment. By November, he leaves Baghdad entirely. His sudden departure from the absolute pinnacle of power is really what makes this whole timeline so shocking. And to truly understand the weight of his decision, you have to recognize what he was giving up. Al-Ghazālī wasn't just a teacher. He was essentially the president of the Harvard of the medieval Islamic world. He taught an estimated 3,000 students right at the center of the empire. He literally had the ear of the Sultan. He was walking away from unmatched fortune, immense political sway, and thousands of adoring students who hung on to his every single word.
Now, a lot of modern historians actually get a bit twisted up here, and they lump his struggles together into one big breakdown. But there were actually two distinct events. First, you have this crisis of the mind, a period of severe epistemological doubt, where he really questioned how we know what we know. But the true catalyst? That was a crisis of the heart. This was a severe, paralyzing emotional and psychological crisis rooted in the deep spiritual fear of divine punishment. And that is what actually made him pack up and leave.
And we know exactly what was going on in his head because he documented it all in his famous autobiography, Deliverance from Error. He writes, "I have constantly been diving daringly in the depths of this profound sea, not like a cautious coward." See, he was absolutely not afraid of complex intellectual challenges. He thrived on them. So his sudden paralysis and his inability to speak in 1095 had to be caused by something way deeper than just academic doubt or intellectual burnout. So if he wasn't afraid of the heavy intellectual stuff, why did he run? Well, this brings us to a massive controversy in historical circles. A prevailing modern myth, championed by several prominent historians, is the theory that Al-Ghazālī actually fled Baghdad in sheer terror of Ismaili assassins. It's a very dramatic, highly cinematic theory. But we have to ask, is it actually true? I mean, this theory sounds totally plausible at first glance. His incredibly powerful patron, the vizier Nizam al-Mulk, had literally just been murdered. The political climate in Baghdad was incredibly tense, with political leaders constantly looking over their shoulders. Because of all this, some of his harsher critics claim his spiritual autobiography is actually just a piece of self-aggrandizing fiction designed to hide his cowardice. They argue he wasn't looking for God at all. He was just running for his life. But hold on, because the historical evidence completely dismantles this myth. Let's do some rapid-fire myth-busting. First off, he continued writing anti-Ismaili books during his exile. Why on earth would you provoke the exact people you're supposedly hiding from? Second, he willingly traveled to regions like Syria, where Ismaili influence was actually very heavy. Third, historical records show that scholars in Baghdad at that time were dying of natural causes, not assassinations. It was the politicians who were being targeted, not the professors. Just to really drive this point home, 7. That is the total number of anti-Ismaili tracts he wrote throughout his lifetime. He boldly challenged them long after he supposedly went into hiding in 1095. A terrified man wouldn't actively invite a target on his back 7 different times if his primary reason for leaving his cushy job was physical fear. And if you doubt his personal bravery, just check out this amazing anecdote from his youth. While he was traveling as a student, his caravan gets attacked by highway robbers who loot absolutely everything. Did Al-Ghazālī run away? Nope. He recklessly confronted the leader of the gang, basically demanding his homework back. He didn't care about the gold, he just wanted his class notes. This specific, surprising little story really proves his core personality just wasn't one to turn and run at the very first sign of physical danger. Okay, so scratch the assassin theory. What was it? Well, his contemporary biographer nailed it with this profound statement. A door of fear was opened for him. The true culprit behind his disappearance was this massive internal reckoning. It was the fear of the divine, the fear of the afterlife, and this really harsh realization of his own hypocrisy. It was absolutely not the fear of earthly assassins. At the core of his malady was a realization of impure intentions. Al-Ghazālī woke up and realized his entire career, his massive intellect, his teaching, it was all largely motivated by worldly ego, wealth, and fame rather than pure devotion to God. If we translate this to today's terms, we are essentially looking at an extreme 11th century case of career burnout and severe imposter syndrome. He looked at his unmatched success and suddenly felt like it was entirely hollow and spiritually incredibly dangerous. So how exactly do you disappear when you're the most famous guy in the empire? You orchestrate a highly calculated exit strategy. He knew his students and the Sultan would never let him just drop everything and leave. So he methodically planned a secret exit. He sets up a trust fund so his family would be financially secure. He appoints his brother to take over his prestigious teaching gig. He publicly announces a fake trip to Mecca for the Hajj pilgrimage to throw off suspicion, and then secretly escapes towards Syria. And we're not talking about a quick 6-month sabbatical here. 10. He literally vanished from the intellectual and public scene for 10 full years. Just imagine being the most famous thinker of your era and simply dropping off the map for a decade. It was an incredible sacrifice of the absolute prime of his life, completely dedicated to healing his deep psychological and spiritual crisis. So what did he do with all that time? He went looking for the cure. Al-Ghazālī recognized that to fix his paralyzed state, sitting around reading more philosophy just wasn't going to work. He needed a radical lifestyle change. He embraced the ascetic, minimalist practices of the Sufi mystics. He cleansed himself of unnecessary material possessions, he completely withdrew from the chaotic political noise of Baghdad, and he dedicated his daily life purely to God. And during this time, he arrived at this profound, ultimate realization. Truth must be tasted. The Arabic word for this is dhawq. Think about it like this. You can talk about the sweetness of sugar all day long. You can write whole encyclopedias about it. But until you actually taste it, you don't truly know it. He realized that some knowledge goes way beyond academic study and just has to be intimately experienced firsthand. The contrast of his transformation is just stunning. He goes from being the wealthy, prestigious Baghdad professor motivated by ego and worldly success to the wandering ascetic mystic seeking pure intentions. He completely reprogrammed his priorities. And the beautiful irony here is that it was during this quiet, isolated exile that he wrote his absolute greatest masterpiece, the revival of the religious sciences. And honestly, this is exactly why this explainer matters to us today. Al-Ghazālī's struggle is entirely timeless. True success requires us to continually evaluate our inner motivations against our outward achievements. His story forces us to pause and ask ourselves whether our own daily pursuits, our careers, our big goals, are they driven by genuine, grounded purpose, or are they just driven by this exhausting hunger for external validation and ego? It leaves us to wonder about our own lives and our own priorities. So let's end on this thought. If you had all the wealth, the prestige, and the fame the world could possibly offer you, would you actually have the courage to walk away from all of it, just to cure your own crisis of the heart and find your true self?